This is Green Street, the Environmental Health Show. GreenStreetNews.org, Patty and Doug Wood, and our worldwide network of experts here every week to help you navigate your way through this increasingly toxic world. Welcome back. We've all seen the messages from children's cancer centers asking for your donations to help find a cure for these poor kids. We feel for those kids and we empathize with their suffering parents. But somebody has to say that while we need to do everything we can for these kids, spending time and resources searching for a pharmaceutical cure while we ignore the known and proven environmental links to cancer doesn't make a lot of sense. I think everyone would agree that prevention of disease is always better than treatment. In a few weeks, our kids will be heading back to school to spend a good part of their early lives in classrooms and on school grounds. Today on Green Street, in part 2 of our series, we're going to talk more about several of the most common environmental exposures that occur in schools and how those exposures might be mitigated or even eliminated in a program called the ChildSafe School. So if you're a parent or a grandparent of a child in school or know a teacher or school board member or principal or superintendent, please share this program with them.
Last week, we talked about the 54 million school-age children who spend a big part of their lives in classrooms and other school facilities, and how important it is to eliminate any toxin in those environments, especially at a time when these young bodies are just developing, a critical window of development when environmental exposures can do maximum damage.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about 3 more common exposures that occur at most schools and how they can be mitigated or even eliminated with a science-based program called the ChildSafe School. On the web at thechildsafeschool.org, the program is filled with scientific studies, policy ideas, videos, and other information that can help teachers, facilities directors, school boards, and administrators make their schools as environmentally safe as possible. So, Patty, let's start with a subject we happen to know a lot about, artificial turf, or to use a more accurate term, plastic playing fields. What are the issues?
Well, I'm going to start with a quote from Dr. David Brown. He's the former deputy director of the Public Health Practice Group at the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And he said, "A natural but cruel experiment is being conducted in which hundreds of thousands of young athletes who play on artificial turf fields are being exposed to chemicals that may cause cancer or other serious illness."
Ouch. That's quite a quote.
Yeah, it is quite a quote. So let's talk about this, okay? Can we draw a straight line from exposure to these fields, exposure from playing on these fields to a disease? No, it's really, really impossible to draw that straight line. But we have some common sense here, right?
I was going to say, it doesn't mean it's not dangerous.
Common sense says we should be careful.
Yeah.
Really careful, especially with our youngest players.
Okay.
Right? So artificial turf, or as you said more accurately, plastic playing fields, are made up of a carpet of plastic and blades, and they usually have some kind of material to cushion the field so that you can fall on it without risk of a serious injury. Mm-hmm. In most fields, the cushioning or infill material is made up of tiny pieces of rubber that were once vehicle tires. We're talking about cars and trucks and buses and construction vehicles and so on. So this is an amazing fact. Up to 40,000 used tires can be used for a single football field.
Wow.
40,000 tires.
Wow.
And they're all tires from, from all these different vehicles that I just mentioned. So you can't tell exactly what's in them, right? The chemical composition in those tires.
Because every tire is different.
Everyone. So the crumb rubber contains a myriad of toxic restricted use chemicals, including heavy metals like lead and arsenic and so on, and then volatiles and semi-volatiles, benzene, and so on, and then carbon black, which makes up about 40% of every tire, and that is a known carcinogen.
You know, Patty, last week we talked about how kids live in their environment in a way that adults don't really, they're down on the ground, they're falling on the ground, they're breathing in.
Yeah.
The dust.
We talked about kids inside a classroom, but, now we're talking about kids outside on the field.
Yeah.
Okay? And, of course, they're living in it the way adults typically don't. They're lying on the grass, they've got a snack and their water bottle and And they're practicing.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw a video of soccer goalies at a practice, and they were like diving into that turf like 100 times.
And every time
every practice.
And every time they dove in, there was this cloud of dust that came up.
Yeah, it's the dust. You mentioned it, and I am absolutely afraid of this exposure because they don't really talk about the dust from these tire particles, right?
Yeah.
But when you grind them, you're making a lot of dust, and you can actually see the dust flying up when these kids fall on it or dive in it, and that's problematic because
Sure.
that dust can easily get into their lungs.
Yeah.
Which means it can easily get into their bloodstream.
And that's probably the primary route of exposure, right?
Yeah.
It's just breathing it in.
Yeah. So many of these chemicals, as we said, are known carcinogens. They're also neurotoxins and endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly concerned about endocrine disrupting chemicals because endocrine disrupting chemicals are different in that they can actually do real harm in incredibly small amounts. So disrupting the endocrine system in a young life is a risky thing to do that may have lifelong consequences. And so just that one concern alone, where you've got endocrine disrupting chemicals that can wreak havoc on a young body, should be enough to make us stop and rethink this. But there's more too.
Okay.
You know, these fields get really, really hot. We have temperature readings that have shown fields as high as 200 degrees when the ambient temperature is 98 degrees. So that almost doubles the temperature. Just to give you an idea, the artificial turf is 37 degrees higher than asphalt. You know what it's like when you've got bare feet and you're coming out of a place where you're at a pool or something and you're just ow, 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 ow as you walk along because the surface is so hot on that asphalt. And it's also 87 degrees higher than natural grass.
Wow.
87 degrees higher than natural grass. Now, you know, they sell, the artificial turf companies actually sell water cannons. So when they see that the temperatures have gotten really high, they can actually cool them down. But the cooling from the water cannons will only last for about 20 minutes, and then they have to do it again and again and again. So what do we worry about? We worry about dehydration. We worry about heat exhaustion. We worry about heat stroke. We actually have kids who have burns on the bottoms of their feet, on the soles of their feet, that they have gotten right through their shoes and their socks. Yeah, when these turf fields get really, really high. And also, the volatile chemicals that are in the crumb rubber infill material volatilize more readily in hot weather, correct?
Yep.
And so I've heard kids say, man, those fields just smell terrible when it's really hot.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it's from.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we have unusual injuries that occur. Something called turf toe is brand new since we started installing artificial turf fields. It's kind of a debilitating sprain of the big toe, and that happens. But remember the Super Bowl game where Odell Beckham was lost to the game due to a knee injury?
I remember.
Yep.
Super Bowl. Yep.
Yep, and his leg got caught on the plastic field.
Same
And
as
then
Aaron
Rodgers,
I was just gonna say,
he
same as
lasted
Aaron
just a
Rodgers.
few plays for the New York Jets before the same thing happened to him, and that ended him for the whole
Yep,
season.
that was the season.
Yep.
That was the Jets season.
Yep.
You would think that the owners would take note of that and say, gee whiz, we just paid this guy, X million dollars to play, and now he can't play because of the artificial turf.
Right.
Why doesn't that dawn on these guys?
I don't know. But an emerging issue of great concern is the microplastic pollution problem. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so we know that plastic breaks down with the elements. Exposure to sun, UV radiation is the number one cause of plastic degradation. But then you have rain and snow and wind and the relentless pounding of feet.
Yeah.
Okay, it's wear and tear, right?
Sure.
That breaks down the plastic into smaller and smaller pieces. And when the wind blows, or a child is, lying on the field or tumbles on the field or whatever, these microplastics are released and can be easily inhaled. But breathing in microplastics on a regular basis, we don't really know. We just don't have enough information yet.
Well,
but
we do have some information on heart disease and plastic.
we do. Yeah, we do. But anyways, to end this, natural grass fields are much, much cheaper. Let's talk about that for a second. So compared to grass, an artificial turf field is like $1 million plus. Okay, and that's the price tag for the initial installation, and then they need to be replaced.
Yeah, they
every
don't
7
last.
to 10 years.
Sure.
So you got to cough up some more money, substantial amounts of money to replace them.
Yep.
The best part is that grass is safe for our kids, and they sequester carbon. They're a carbon sink, and they stay relatively cool. We talked about the difference between the temperature, with grass and artificial turf. They don't need toxic crumb rubber, but the soil actually can break down body fluids, which are also a problem on artificial turf because, kids spit, they sweat, they throw up, they bleed. All kinds of body fluids can wind up on artificial turf fields. And they're supposed to be disinfected after every practice and every game. That doesn't happen.
No.
Okay, it doesn't happen. But if you're on natural grass, the soil biology, all those little things in the soil will break down those pathogens. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. So, one of the reasons that they push artificial turf is that you get bare spots and kids trip on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It does happen. I've seen some pretty bad-looking grass fields, okay? Yeah. But if you know what to do, and it's a simple thing, it's a two-step process. You aerate and you overseed because natural grass's worst enemy is compaction. Yeah. So you got to relieve that compaction all the time. You invest in an aerator and grass seed. And you just do it continuously throughout the entire playing season.
Nature knows best.
Nature knows best.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to talk about wireless in the classroom for a minute. Today's classrooms are filled with technology, laptops, tablets, routers, smart boards, smart projectors. Pretty much everything in a modern classroom is wireless. And what is it that makes wireless work? It's radio frequency radiation. Now, RF radiation was once thought to be harmless. The only damage it could do would be to heat your skin. I think when the engineers were first developing the microwave, they used to come in the morning and hold their hands in front of the microwave to warm them up, not realizing what the potential danger was. But now we've got thousands of studies, including a major study from the National Institutes of Health, showing that exposure at levels below the current FCC guidelines can have biological effects and trigger symptoms. So those FCC guidelines were developed back in the 1980s for adults. Nobody really expected that kids would be playing with RF radiation emitting wireless devices. If you told somebody back in the 1980s that classrooms were going to be filled with kids walking around with wireless devices, they would say, "What are you talking about?" Right?
And of course, then they go home and they have homework to do on their wireless devices. And they all have phones. And so they're on these wireless phones day in and day out.
Right. So it's not just a classroom exposure, but classroom exposures can be significant. Because you got cumulative effects over time, and you've got all these different devices in the room all going at the same time. So many kids with their own devices, each one kind of putting out this radiation, plus you got the smart board and the smart speaker and whatever other smart devices there are. Going back to what we were talking about before, kids are more vulnerable to these kinds of exposures than adults. So a safety regulation or a guideline that might work for an adult isn't necessarily protective for kids. And nobody's ever looked at this. There's no government agency that's looking at kids and their exposure to wireless and determining whether or not it's safe or not. So, for instance, a router that's in a typical classroom comes pre-wired for maximum power. You plug it in, and it puts out as much power. It's a commercial router, right? That's what makes it work, and the more it works, the happier everybody is. But that's way too much power for most classrooms. Adjusting the power level output of a router in a classroom is relatively easy. Any competent IT person can do it. And there are schools that have reduced their output from their routers by 90%. And everything in the classroom still works, but the level of radiation drops considerably. So, again, on the ChildSafe School, online at thechildsafeschool.org, we've got a whole section about RF radiation. We've also developed our own website just for this issue of radiation in schools. It's called techsafeschools.org. And there you'll find detailed instructions for IT people on how to reduce levels and other ideas for reducing the amount of RF radiation in classrooms. This is an emerging issue, and we're going to hear more and more about this as time goes on. And by the way, kids don't necessarily learn better with this whole wireless, walking around with their tablets.
Well, that's another whole conversation.
It is.
And we can talk to a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are writing books about it now because our kids are not doing as well as they did before they were, learning on their screens.
And just like adults, some kids are more sensitive to this radiation than others. So there are some kids who will develop a headache, or they'll feel nauseous, or they'll be dizzy, or, they've got brain fog. Brain fog is not something you want to introduce into a kid in school, right? That's not where you want this. Some kids are particularly vulnerable, and they're going to be suffering more than others just because we have all this radiation in the classroom. So hopefully, as we get more science and more studies coming out, and there are more studies, every day we're seeing more scientific studies on the impact of wireless radiation on biology and on people's health, we'll finally take a careful look at how much radiation we're allowing in classrooms. So that's where we are. I think we have one more subject to cover. So let's talk a little bit about LED lighting. What do you got on that?
Well, LED lights, as you know, are the only thing that you can buy when you go to Home Depot or, local hardware stores or whatever.
Yeah.
They actually made it illegal to sell incandescent lights.
Unbelievable.
Although you can still get them if you really look for them. But LEDs are light-emitting diodes. They are a type of solid-state lighting that use a semiconductor to convert electricity into light. So it's a completely different technology from the bulbs that we have been used to, okay? They produce significant amounts of blue light, though, which can cause harm to the eyes and disrupt circadian rhythm, which is your sleep and awake cycle.
That's
right?
your body clock, right?
Right. Blue light encompasses shorter wavelengths and is a higher energy emitter, similar to ultraviolet light, except that ultraviolet or UV light is invisible and blue light appears white to our naked eye. So until relatively recently, our only exposure to blue light was the sun, which is considered a short-term exposure. LEDs, though, contain about 35% of this harmful blue light, and we are exposed to it more and more in our homes, workplaces, and especially in our schools, and our daily use of screens, right?
Yeah.
Our devices with screens. This is super problematic for our kids today. So LED bulbs also contain lead and arsenic and nickel and copper, and in different amounts depending on the bulb. However, I don't think most people are aware of this. If you have an LED bulb, break at a school, facilities directors or custodians in school environments are not warned of the potential hazard that cleaning up an LED bulb is something that you need to be really, really careful about.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that, makes it problematic in schools. So LEDs and our eyes. Let's just talk about that for a second. So cumulative exposure to LED and the myriad of devices with screens that we're looking at day in and day out, especially our kids, have long and short-term effects on eye health. Short-term, we've talked about headaches and eye strain and dry and burning eyes and dizziness and these same kinds of things that you were talking about before,
with RF
coming
radiation.
from RF radiation,
Interesting.
can also come from LED bulbs. But serious long-term effects include retinal damage, cataracts, and age-related macular degeneration, which is typically related to aging, but we are now diagnosing this in younger and younger people.
Wow.
Okay, let's get back to this circadian rhythm, which I mentioned previously. Exposure to LEDs in the form of lighting or digital device screens interrupts our natural circadian rhythm or our sleep-wake cycle, leading to poorer quality and insufficient sleep. Darkness at night is critical for the production of melatonin in the brain's pineal gland.
So this is really not such an issue for schools, but for kids at home when we're talking
On
about
their screens at home, they
Yeah.
shouldn't be on those screens just before they go to sleep,
Yeah.
because they've already tricked their pineal gland in their brain into thinking that it's daytime, time
Yeah.
to be awake.
Yeah.
Time to be awake now. So, what can you do about this? Well, you can actually replace these LEDs and compact fluorescent bulbs, which has a problem, with these long life incandescents. Light color or color temperature is measured using something called the Kelvin scale, which has a range of 1,000 to 10,000, called 1,000 K, 10,000 K. And so LEDs are actually available in warm colors, just like our old incandescent bulbs. And that's below 3,500 K. It's got to be below that for our school classrooms.
So any school classroom that has a bulb above that, you could just change the bulb out.
You can just change the bulb. You can just change the bulb if they're going to keep LEDs.
Yeah.
Because, that's kind of the state of the art right now. And that's what everybody is saying you have to use because they save energy.
Yes.
Right? It's all about their saving energy, but we forgot to think about the public health component of that.
Yeah.
Okay. But they are available in these warm colors, and it's got to be below the 3,500 K. Because that doesn't give you that white-blue color, which is the thing that triggers this whole sleep-wake cycle disruption.
Yeah.
So you want to use a warm-colored LED light. I think the bulbs are typically found in something in the number 2700K, and that's what you're looking for, is a 2700K bulb to use. If you're going to use LED bulbs in schools, that's what you want. It's your warm color, it's a more natural color, and it doesn't cause any of these problems that we just talked about.
There you go. An easy solution.
An easy solution.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome.
The environmental challenges that kids face in school today, chronic low-level exposures to cleaning products, diesel exhaust, pesticides, wireless radiation, LED lighting, and artificial turf, all subjects that are covered in depth in the online program called ChildSafeSchool.org, where you can find videos, scientific studies, school system policies, basically anything and everything that a school administrator might need to make their school truly environmentally safe for all the kids who spend so much of their lives there. Again, if you're a parent or a grandparent of a child in school and you know a teacher, a school board member, a principal, a superintendent, please share this program with them. All of our Green Street shows are always available on our website, which is greenstreetnews.org, and edited versions of our shows without the news section are also available on our YouTube channel. Just search YouTube for Green Street, Patty and Doug, and it'll come right up. That's going to do it for our show today. Patty and I will be back next week with another edition of Green Street. Thanks so much for listening.